Ooh. Oh. Ta-da! Hello, and welcome to Flat Coloring, the first video of a 10-part tutorial and demonstration series on using Blick Studio alcohol markers for coloring. These tutorials will teach you how to color, while the demonstrations show how I apply these lessons to a fantasy coloring page. There's a lot to cover in this series, and we're going to start off as simple as possible, but we will be increasing the difficulty in each tutorial. Blick Studio markers have a long, beveled rectangle design, and Blick has chosen to make them dual-tipped with a brush tip on one side and a chisel tip on the other. I will be focusing almost exclusively on the brush tip throughout this series, but a chisel tip is also very versatile for making a variety of marks or covering large areas quickly. I will be covering all of the features and characteristics of Blick Studio markers in the marker review video, which will be the final video of this series. Today, we're going to be learning about flat or simple coloring, which is literally the simplest type of coloring we can apply to an image. While a tutorial may not be absolutely necessary, I will also show you some techniques that will lead towards slightly more advanced coloring in this video. Alcohol markers are semi-transparent, and their color can be built up to some degree. Here I have a sphere that has been colored with just red 005 in 5 layers. The paper you are using will determine how many layers you could get away with, though I can say that this will work on everything from 20-pound copy paper to 100-pound bristle board. Most of this tutorial was created with 18-pound Canson marker paper, which is smooth and less porous than standard copy paper, allowing the ink to float on the surface for a moment or two. I will start by showing different ways we can affect the color from a marker by applying it over other colors. I have left the first circle blank, so we will have an example of our unaltered color, while the other circles have been colored with a light gray, dark gray, yellow, and blue base. The Blick Studio alcohol marker set also has a colorless blender, which works kind of like an eraser. As that ink soaks into the page, it will push the colors we have already applied away from the wet spot where we apply it. This can be useful for removing or minimizing small mistakes or adding highlights if we didn't leave any open white spaces on the page or if the ink bled into them. In the small top circle, I have applied the colorless blender as a base to see if that will have any effect on the color going over it. Now I'm going over each of the circles with a single red marker. As you can see, the red is affected very slightly by the light gray, more prominently by the dark gray and blue, and the yellow has slightly shifted the red color toward orange, while the colorless base seems to have darkened or dirtied the red in that circle. Finally, I used the colorless blender to erase a highlight in the bottom red circle. Just letting the brush tip sit in contact will work better than scrubbing, and I tried the chisel tip as well since the effect seemed to be too weak. The dirty effect you will see in the video is actually the paper becoming more transparent as it soaks up the ink, letting my dark surface underneath show through. Once the ink dries, this goes away. I am repeating the same process on rough drawing paper, which is very porous. Here, the marker ink is sucked into the paper very quickly and has a more dried out and rough appearance. The colors appear to be faded, and the dry roughness of the paper makes the marker strokes more visible, while the underlying color effect is almost exclusively limited to value. And we'll talk more about color value shortly. Coloring over the colorless blender seems to smooth out the color a bit more, probably due to having ink in the paper already. This should demonstrate the importance of knowing how our paper will affect the marker so that we can ensure a successful outcome to our coloring. Switching back to marker paper, we will now look at blending colors to create gradients using red, yellow, and blue. My gradients are a bit rough here, but with practice and more gradual layers, they can be made very smooth. Going back to the topic of color value, Value is a measure of how light or dark a color is on a spectrum of white to black. We can create a rough value gradient using light gray and dark gray to adjust the values of our red, yellow, and blue markers, which can be useful in depicting colors in different levels of light or shadow. We will further discuss light, shadow, and rendering in the more advanced coloring videos. However, I do want to show you in this video how we can use our flat color along with a grayscale gradient to suggest form and make these circles look a bit more like spheres. Even with the little bit of practice I am getting by making this video, my gradients have improved a bit. On this final card, I have shown a gray gradient with a glossy or shiny highlight and one with a more subtle gray light spot. This is part of a coloring technique that can be used to define shiny or matte materials in our coloring, and we will be expanding on that in the tutorial on basic coloring. My next video will demonstrate flat coloring on page 6 of my fantasy art coloring book. Please like and subscribe. Also, let me know if this tutorial has been useful to you in the comments section. I would like to thank my Patreon patrons, whose financial support helps to offset the cost of supplies for both my art and videos. I really couldn't keep this up without you. Thank you. Join me on Patreon for regular updates on my current art projects, full-size, high-resolution image downloads, and more at patreon.com/EricPerkinsArtist. Thank you. I hope to see you next time.